Hello everyone and welcome to another C programming tutorial video. This is the part 3. In the previous video we were looking at how we can use the arguments in the main function. And we wrote a simple program that took in the name as an argument and printed it next to the hello. In this video we're going to go through some data types. And if you haven't watched the previous video, I'll put a link to it in the description. So, the first data type I want to go through is integers. So I am declaring and defining a variable here called age, which has the data type integer and it's equal to 23. So this is how you declare a variable. First you put the data type, the name of the variable, and the value. So data type, name, equal sign, value. Now you can also do it like this. You can declare a variable without defining it, and you can define it later in the program, like doing so. But we're not going to do that today. So, okay, we got integers. Now we also have data type modifiers, and one of them is unsigned. So here I'm defining an unsigned integer called ABC and it's 23. So what's the difference between the unsigned integer and the integer here? Well, the difference is that this integer here is actually signed. By default, when you put an int like this, it's going to be signed. And what's the difference between a signed integer and an unsigned integer? Well, the signed integer here has the possibility to also be a negative number. So you can actually make this negative just fine. Now the unsigned integer here, it can never be negative. And what this means is that usually on most systems, the unsigned integer takes up less memory. So you can actually improve the performance memory-wise in your application by being very specific about what kind of integer you want to use. Now you can also use unsigned for other data types. For example, you can have an unsigned char. And a char is basically just a character, right? So here I'm saying that I am defining a character to the variable a, and the character is k. And basically a character is just a digit. So if I print this character here as a digit, a, and we compile and we run it, we're going to get a number here. Now, if I were to change this to something else, if I put a here, for example, we compile it and we run it, we're going to get another number. If I increment this character here with, like, I don't know, 5, we're going to get another number. And if we actually print it as a character now, using %c, we're going to get the character f, which is not a, right? Because we incremented it with 5. So characters are actually digits, and therefore we can also make them unsigned. So now this here can never be negative, okay? Then we have floats, and floats are basically numbers that has decimal points to it. So here we have a float, weight is equal to 10.0005f. Now, the reason why I'm putting an f here is because I'm being very specific and I'm telling the compiler that this is indeed a float. In some cases, the compiler might try to interpret it as a double instead. So I'm being very specific here, this is a float. Now, in this case, we wouldn't need it because the compiler knows this is going to be a float based on the data type here. But in some cases, you actually want to be specific. So I'm actually always putting an f there to telling it that this is a float. Then we have doubles, which are basically the same as floats, but floats actually takes up more memory than a double based depending on your system, of course, but that's usually the case. But doubles are more specific, and we'll get to that in another video, why doubles are more specific, but that's just the way it is. And then we have the char here. We went through it before. A char is basically just a digit, and to define a char, you just put it in single quotes, not double quotes, okay? Now we're getting to another interesting thing, strings. There isn't a built-in data type in C for strings. A string in C is just an array of characters. So a string in C is an array of these. And we actually encountered strings in the previous video when we went through this thing here. This is a list of strings. And I'll go through a bit later on why that is a list of strings, okay? So here I'm defining a string called, the variable is called name1, and it's equal to John. And what this means here, the star here, it means that this is a pointer. So it's pointing somewhere in the memory. And it's pointing to the first byte of this string here that I'm defining. And you define a string using double quotes, like this. And you can also define a string like this. We can say that it's a char array using the brackets like this. And the compiler will know what to do with that. And here is an array of char arrays. So it's an array of strings. So I'm saying that I have a pointer list or a pointer array called strings, and it's equal to the string John and the string Doe. So if I want to print the first element here in that list, I could do %sn strings 0. Compile it, run it, and we're getting the John string. Cool. Now you can create arrays of other values or other data types as well. So for example, here I'm declaring a integer array, and it has the value of 1, 2, and 3. And the same goes here. If I want to print the first number or the first value in that array, I just do %d and numbers 0. Compile it, run it, and we're getting the 1. If I want to print the second element, I just do 1. Because remember, the array starts from 0. So the number 1 is always the second element. And by the way, we're going through the most common data types here. We're not going to go through all of them because that would be a very long video, but I think you will get the basic idea from this video. Then we have another pretty common data type, which is a struct. And you can basically see a struct as an object or a container of information, and a struct can have multiple fields within it. So here I have defined a struct called person, and it has an integer age and a float weight. And then I'm assigning the age to 22 of the person, and the person.weight is 15.0f. So to access members of an object, you use the dot token here. So for example, now if I want to print the person age, I do printf %d for number, new line, person.age. Compile it, run it. Okay. So there's something I forgot to mention. These strings here are not dynamically allocated, so you usually don't want other parts of the program to modify them, because that can cause undefined behavior in some cases. So what you want to do is actually put the const here. So we're telling the program that, or we're telling the compiler that these variables should never be modified because they are not dynamically allocated. I'll go through in another video how to dynamically allocate things. We're going to go through malloc and calloc and memory allocations. But you get the point. So, let's go through what we did there. We define an integer, age 23, cool. And then we use the modifier here. This token here is called a modifier. So it's a modifier for the data. In this case, this is a modifier for the data type int. So we're saying that this is an unsigned int, ABC23, and we have an unsigned char, and we have a float weight. We have a double weight. We have a char c is equal to a. We have a char array called name1, which is equal to John. We have a char name2, which is also a string array, which is equal to John. Then we have a list of string arrays. So we have a list, or we have a list of char arrays, I mean, or an array of char arrays. So it's a list of strings basically, and it contains the John and the Doe string. Then we have an array of numbers, which contains 1, 2, and 3. Then we have a struct person, which has the age field and a weight field. And we're assigning the age to 22, and we're assigning the weight to 15.0f. Okay, so these are, I would say, the most commonly used data types. There are other data types as well, but I think these are the most commonly used. We won't go through them all in this video, because that would be a very long video. But this is basically it, okay? I think the most important thing here the thing that most people find confusing are actually strings. Now, strings are pretty difficult to work with in C. But the thing to always remember is that they are actually just lists of characters. So a string is just an array of characters. A string is an array of these kind of things, basically. So yeah, these are the most commonly used data types. So I think most of them are pretty familiar if you've worked with other languages. I think the most, or the one that other people might find a bit strange when they go into C is the structs maybe, but they're actually just objects or containers of information. But yeah, that's basically it for this video. I hope we learned something today. I think most of this isn't new information for most people. These are data types that exists in most languages. But yeah. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.